Kia ora, good evening. I'm Carolyn Robinson.
I'm Alistair Wilkinson. Tonight on 3 News, tragedy on the Manukau.
And a nightmare for a 9-year-old boy as his mother and sister drown before his eyes.
Why it's game, set and match against David Benson Pope and what the woman who aced him had to say about him.
The callous new tactic that's been devised by suicide bombers in Iraq using mentally handicapped human bombs.
And Auckland's new motorway bus lanes are open, but not without a hiccup and a catch for schools.
This is 3 News.
A 9-year-old boy has been found on the Manukau mudflats after he spent hours huddled in the dark beside the bodies of his 6-year-old sister and their mother. His father had already struggled out in search of help. They'd been wading and looking for fish at a spot called Seagrove and became separated in the early hours of the morning. Tristram Clayton is there with more details. Tristram.
Carolyn, the family of 4 went looking for flounder at about 11 o'clock last night, and it wasn't until 3 a.m. this morning that they became separated at the mouth of the Whatapaka Inlet, about 2 kilometres from where they were eventually brought to shore. The tragic end to a family fishing trip that became a family nightmare. Instead of returning home with a bin full of flounder, a 42-year-old mother and her 6-year-old daughter were themselves dragged from the mud of the Manukau harbour. The tragedy began when the father, the only one with the torch, became separated in the darkness from his wife, daughter and 9-year-old son.
Dad heard the children cry, so he spent a bit of time trying to find them. When he had no luck finding them, he had to travel a fair distance, 1 or 2 kilometres, so that he could raise the alarm and let the authorities know.
The time that took meant search and rescue teams now faced an incoming tide and 3 missing people who had no life jackets and no torches.
With Westpac helicopter and their night vision gear, even a cigarette lighter or a cell phone light, even that they can pick that up from 5 miles away. So if they would have had even a small torch, the chance of them being found would have been a lot higher.
At around 9 in the morning, the police helicopter found the missing group. They'd been swept 2 kilometres from the mouth of the inlet where they'd been separated.
They found the boy sitting on the rocks by his mum and his sister, which was a bit further away, and they were lying face down in the mud. The boy was saying that he thought mum was asleep and just lying there. Where they were, it's going to take us quite a while, up to an hour, half an hour, to get a team in there. So Eagle flew just above, circling, making sure the boy was okay, making sure he felt that somebody was with him.
The 2 bodies were found 200 metres through this dense mangrove swamp. Locals say the incoming tide can reach 5 knots an hour as it comes up the river, and the main channel is up to 3 metres deep at high tide.
It's a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. People need to be equipped when they're going in to these areas. The kids couldn't swim. If they can't swim, they need life jackets. Even if you're not in a boat, a life jacket could have saved their lives here.
The boy and his dad have been reunited, but even their rescuers were struggling to cope with the loss. And Carolyn, such is the sadness behind this tragedy that even the search and rescue personnel, hardened folk, one guy had been working 15 years doing this, when we were asking him questions about what exactly happened, about the rescue, about the search, you could see tears welling up in his eyes. Such was the sadness behind this particular case.
Tristram, can you run through exactly what they were doing out there for us?
Well, Carolyn, it's important to realise that there was no boat involved here. They drove to the beach side, parked up their car, and then basically walked along the mud flats. Now, they probably weren't out very far, we don't know exactly, probably up to 100 metres or so out on the mud. When they started, the tide was out, there was no water in sight. But as the search and rescue team explained to us, sometimes at night, the water can actually come up channels behind you and end up cutting you off while you're out there looking for the flounder.
OK, Tristram Clayton, thank you.
The coffin lid is closing on the political career of David Benson Pope. Labour has selected Claire Curran instead as its candidate to stand at the next election in Dunedin South. Sia Aston is live with that story. Sia.
Well, Alistair, it took 5 hours for the Labour Party's Dunedin South electorate to decide a winner in what was essentially a 2-horse race, and it was the favourite who took the title of the reigning champion. This morning he arrived with his family looking supremely confident, but 5 hours later the verdict was delivered and he re-emerged flanked by Labour Party colleagues, defeated but still flying his own flag.
I'm pretty proud of my record of achievement both for the city as a city councillor and as an MP.
Claire Curran followed a few respectful minutes later, victorious but diplomatic.
It's a very big achievement for me. I'm just an ordinary girl from Portobello.
An ordinary girl who's toppled a sitting MP with a 10,000 vote majority. No ordinary achievement. Claire Curran herself, of course, has been under something of a cloud over communications contracts she won with the Ministry for Environment and allegations of political interference that put her there. That prompted a State Services Commission report which cleared her of any wrongdoing, though left the ministry looking less than rosy, and of course implicated David Benson Pope for his part in that. That was just one of the political errors which has led to his meteoric demise. He was once one of the Prime Minister's most trusted henchmen.
What I thought happened in the election campaign was way over the top. I thought both TV1 and TV3, through their main reporters or interviewers, were downright rude, really.
His defence of the Prime Minister in the early days, rewarded by a slew of ministerial positions after a cabinet reshuffle in 2004, all looked to stand the once hugely popular Dunedin South MP in good stead for the future. But that was before a string of incidents, starting with the former secondary school teacher being somewhat slow to tell a full and frank version of events. The first sign of trouble came in 2005 when Benson Pope was stood down from cabinet after allegations he'd physically abused students while teaching at Bayfield High School in the 1980s.
I have not been guilty or involved in any inappropriate behaviour in my 24 years as a secondary school teacher, nor am I aware of any complaint of any kind. What was not appropriate for me to say was that there'd never been a complaint of any kind against me, because clearly they had.
He was on notice and carefully kept out of the limelight for the following year until he was caught out again in 2007. This time he failed to be upfront about his role in the sacking of Environment Ministry Communications Manager Madeline Setchell.
I don't employ staff in the Ministry for the Environment, Duncan.
From the point of view of my office, I will likely be less free and frank in meetings with such a person. That was a statement of the obvious.
Then the loss of the Prime Minister's confidence.
I am disappointed because I expect more.
Finally, Benson Pope resigned from Cabinet in July last year. As one editorial put it, less for what he had done than for his repeated inability to simply say what he had done.
So, Sia, the question is this the end for Benson Pope then?
Well, I asked that question, to put that to him, what next for him? He refused to answer that directly, though he did remind journalists that he's still the local MP for a few months yet. That, of course, is a far cry from the Cabinet Minister he once was.
And what's Helen Clark saying about the decision to go for Claire Curran?
Well, look, the Prime Minister found out the result of this today via text. That's not unusual. Her response was that she congratulated Claire Curran. She said she's looking forward to working with her. As for David Benson Pope, she said he was a long-serving MP and that today was a sad day for him.
Sia, thanks very much.
It's been a horrific day on the roads with 4 road fatalities in the past 19 hours. East of Taupo, a 42-year-old woman was found dead in her vehicle after it rolled off the road. And in South Auckland, 2 people are dead after a 3-car smash. The smash that was the result of a car clipping another while overtaking. Police say one person was thrown from a vehicle but was later pronounced dead at the scene. The second person died later in hospital. The serious crash unit is investigating. In another crash near Thames, one person died after 2 cars collided. Police say a car flipped onto its roof, killing a passenger at the scene. 6 others were taken to hospital with moderate to minor injuries. The Thames Coast Road was closed for a scene examination for several hours, but has now been reopened. While in Auckland, there was a serious crash between 2 cars and a bus last night. Witnesses told 3 News they saw 2 cars racing down the eastern motorway before crashing into a bus travelling ahead. An occupant of one of the cars was trapped for some time. The roof of the car had to be cut open before the person could be freed.
The country's first two-way public busway connecting Auckland's North Shore to the city had its official opening this morning. The 6.4-kilometre dedicated busway begins, as Rebecca Wright reports, at Constellation Station and links 5 new bus stations through to the Auckland Harbour Bridge. Travelling from Albany to the city is now expected to take 15 minutes.
It took 20 years of planning, 5 years to build. It cost $300 million. And after a few false starts...
3, 2, 1...
The Northern Busway was finally open. Several thousand Aucklanders turned up to the official opening ceremony and took the opportunity to have a close-up look on a public walk between new station Smails Farm and Akoranga. Getting Aucklanders out of their cars and into public transport is the name of the game. Prime Minister Helen Clark believes that if you build it, they will come.
Build it, people will use it. And the quality is so good that I think it's an unbeatable proposition for the commuter.
Close to 17,000 cars move from the North Shore into the city during peak hours. Although Transit aren't able to say exactly how many commuters they expect to give up their cars in favour of the busway.
I wouldn't like to. I think these figures can be, they're a bit like economists. It's, you've got a whole lot of different opinions, but it's definitely going to, as the uptake, it's going to definitely take a lot of vehicles off the road.
But not all bus commuters have access to the busways as of right. School buses servicing the surrounding area will have to apply to Transit before being granted permission.
We're looking at maximising the use of the busway, but we want to really give it a bit of time to settle down and make sure that we don't put anything in the way of what its prime purpose is, so that people are totally confident in what's been built.
Buses begin using the full service tomorrow, but the real test is expected to come with the Monday morning commute. Rebecca Wright, 3 News.
And the news ahead, devastating new methods of terrorism rock Baghdad. Plus hundreds stranded and boats in trouble as wild weather lashes Britain. Plus wildness of another kind as the Sevens ensure Wellington parties hard.